Hello, everyone. Given that there has been quite a few questions about the ER design, I thought I would do a quick video on some of the steps that are involved in building an ER model, converting it into a schema, and then putting it into a database. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of go quickly over it, but as you know, this is a video, so you can replay and check out some of the steps that we did. So I'm starting with kind of a simplistic design that I already put together with four entities, but I'm going to show you one thing that we didn't talk about in class. So I can explain it a little better. So first, here are the four entities: customer, technician, vehicle, and service. Some of you may realize that customer and technician could be in a generalization together. I'm not going into that detail, but there is one thing that I want to talk about in this video. First, obviously, you have your own business rules that would determine if a customer can own multiple vehicles. We're just going to say, yes, a customer can own multiple vehicles. So I'm going to connect from customer to vehicle. I'm going to say a customer will own, well, does not have to own any vehicles, but can own multiple vehicles. But we're going to require that a vehicle is owned by at most one customer. That is, something that we're going to put. So notice that this is optional many. Customer may not own any vehicles, but can own multiple vehicles. But it is a mandatory one. Given a vehicle, there's only one customer that can own it, and it has to be one customer. All right. So now what we're going to do is something a little different that we haven't talked about. And I think it's important to see that sometimes that can help. Now, you don't need this in your model, but I wanted to show you this anyway. So obviously, technician performs services, vehicle gets services. So you can certainly do it like that. So vehicle receives a service is provided by a technician. But what you're doing there is you're essentially making every specific service. So let's say an oil change to my car. Oh, my car doesn't need oil change. I have an electric car. But let's say oil change to Joe's car is going to be a different service from an oil change to Jack's car or Bill's car or Maya's cars. You understand, right? So every service will need to have a separate entry in the service table. That is not necessary all the time. So sometimes there is a kind of an interesting way. You have seen that in the readings, but basically you can create a ternary relationship that you could say that a technician provides a service to a vehicle. So that way it is capturing all of them into one single relationship. And that is kind of hard to draw in Lucidchart, but this is kind of how I draw it. So basically, I essentially first draw one of the relationship. So I'm going to go from vehicle to service. And yeah, and then as you know that you can actually do this, you can change the line from a zigzag to a straight line. So now what you could do is you could say technician is performing the service, you connect it to that line itself. So now it kind of looks like this initially, but basically here's what it looks like. You have a ternary relationship between the three lines. I obviously will need to fix the endings, and I'm going to make this one also a straight line instead of a zigzag to make it easier to see. So now what happens is you have a three-way relationship between service, vehicle, and technician. Um, and then what we will do is we'll change the endpoint. So this endpoint is not necessary because this is connecting straight to that line. So we're going to turn that into none. And now we'll basically say that, services are this. vehicle can get multiple services, so that is an optional many. May not get any service. So, maybe the vehicle comes in, checks it out, and decides it's not needed. That service is not needed. Also, the services a vehicle, services may not be provided to any vehicle. So that's also optional many. So typically when you have ternary relationships, usually they're always optional many on all the ends. And then this one also going to be an and optional many. So it sort of looks like this. So you have a ternary relationship between service, vehicle, and technician. Now, this is obviously not how you would implement it in the schema. There are certain interesting things that you can think of. That, for example, this ternary relationship may have its own attributes. Like, for example, when was that service performed? That's actually a relationship of that's actually an attribute of this relationship. So again, putting that in the model sometimes could be complicated. So a lot of times people do all kinds of things like, we can put a text saying that date of service. And then you can attach that date to this this service as an attribute. And obviously, this is going to be none on both sides. You're essentially saying that that's an attribute of the relationship. Now, in the readings, it does not really talk about this part, but it uses something called an associative entity to represent this. And that's a much cleaner way to do it. So to use an associative entity, what you're going to do is you're going to take this ternary relationship and upgrade it into an entity. Right? So we're going to turn that into an entity, and we're going to say this is something like service performed. Okay. And that would have the date of service. I don't know. There are other things that you can think of for a service performed, maybe additional fees, notes, whatever you need to attach to that specific service. Now we are looking at, an oil change to a specific vehicle provided on a specific day by a specific technician. So that's why it's such a much more powerful way to implement this. So now what's going to happen is this complicated thing that is happening here is kind of going to go away, and it's going to be a lot nicer. So what we'll do is we'll no longer need this. We don't, and then we're essentially going to replace that relationship with this associative entity. And we're going to say that service performed goes to multiple vehicles. Actually, you could say one specific service performed goes to one vehicle, but basically you would say vehicle receives multiple services. So one of the things to notice is that the relationships sort of flip over, and that's the same thing you see in many-to-many relationships. We talked about that in class, right? So you would notice that many-to-many relationships go towards the two ends. So for example, if this were a many-to-many relationship, the crow's foot is going to flip over if you created an associative entity between them. So just to give you a quick recap, this is where we had the vehicle receives many services, obviously multiple vehicle can be serviced by different technicians. The same service could be given to multiple vehicles. So this is a many to many to many associate ternary relationship. We're turning that into an associative entity. And now you will see that it makes a lot more sense. I'm going to keep this for a little while before I delete it so you can see what is happening. Eventually, this is going to go away because we are replacing this weird, complicated ternary relationship situation with this associative entity, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a relationship between service and service performed. We're going to create an associative relationship between technician and service performed. And we're going to create a relationship between and service performed. Now you will notice that we can switch and say that this is going to be an optional many because the vehicle can receive multiple services performed. Technician can perform many services, may not perform any. So we will say this is also optional many. And a service may be performed on many vehicles. So again, this is also optional many. So you can see that associative entities are much easier to work with. Now, given a service performed, one technician absolutely must perform that service. So we will make that mandatory one. Given a service performed, we need to know which service was performed. Again, that is mandatory one. Sometimes there's a mandatory one, and the service has to be performed on a vehicle. So again, that one is also mandatory one. So now all of a sudden it becomes this nice, pretty looking thing instead of this ugly thing. So now let's remove that ugly thing, and now you would see what the resulting model looks like. All of these are going away. And now we have a nice, simple model with an associative entity. So this is something we didn't talk too much about it. The book, the readings do talk about it and talks about associative entity, but that's essentially what an associative entity is. You have either a many-to-many relationship or potentially a ternary relationship that you are upgrading into an entity. Now, let's convert this into a schema. Okay, so I created a partial schema again, same thing here. But now what I'm going to do is bring in that service performed table. So we're going to put that here. And we'll call this service performed. And so far, I'm not showing any of the foreign keys. Okay, it's only showing primary keys, as you can see. No foreign keys being shown. Let me just complete the model. The draft ERD had date of service, additional fees, notes. All right. So these are not keys. We will decide what the key is. So date of service. This is additional fees and notes. You guys probably know better on how this can get formatted better. I can never seem to format it right. But date of service is a date. Additional fees is a number. Let's say 2, and notes is a varchar 2. Let's say 200. You can put lots of notes in there. Now, notice that, remember that when you create these data types, the data types, make sure they match sort of the Oracle type data types. Don't call anything string or medium int and things like that that Oracle does not support. That way your job will be easier when you actually build the schema. So now let's quickly uh, put the primary keys and foreign keys in. So obviously customer has many vehicles. So as I told you that you'll always put the customer ID and that's going to drop down to the crow's foot as a foreign key. So in the model itself, foreign keys should not need to be there. They don't actually have to be there, and it's a good idea not to create foreign keys because you might end up making a mistake. So because the foreign keys are a process of converting a model to a schema, which is what we are doing right now. So we will take customer ID and make that a foreign key in vehicle because it drops down to the crow's foot. All right. So what we're going to do is, and we'll add another row. We'll make this one a foreign key. We will call it customer ID, and it has to be the same data type as the primary key that it references to. And what we found out is that the arrow, the connection actually is important if you want to use the export feature. So let's see how easy or hard it is. I actually do not like that at all. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to do it as much as possible, but eventually I might give up on it. And here, the optional and mandatories are again important. Obviously, vehicle must belong to a customer. So I might miss a few just, you know, because I'm trying to kind of rush through this video. All right. So again, let's go to schema. We have one-to-many between service and service performed. So the service ID is going to drop down to the crow's foot as a foreign key. Beautiful. So, and you see now that this guy, the service performed, is going to have 3 foreign keys because all these primary keys are going to drop down to the crow's foot, which are all pointing to the associative entity. And that always happens. If you have an associative entity, you're basically going to have a bunch of foreign keys there. We're going to have 3 foreign keys here. So I'm going to take service performed and I'm going to make space for those 3 foreign keys. These are all FK, FK, FK. And let's say customer ID. Sorry, not customer ID, vehicle ID, VIN. So it's the primary key from here that drops down to the foot. Customer ID is not the primary key here. The VIN is the primary key. So we're gonna connect that to this one. For technician, we're gonna say tech ID. The type is the same, varchar2 18. Tech ID was an int here, so it's gonna be an int here. And so let's do that. I'm trying as much as possible to make the connections to the right place. And you're going to see it gets a little tricky sometimes, but looks like not too bad. Again, optional many on this side, but mandatory one on that side. This one also optional many, a mandatory one on. Sometimes I don't know what happens with Lucidchart. Stops giving me. There you go. Optional many to mandatory one. And then finally, one last, let's call this one service ID. And the type is int again. I wonder, can we move this over? Yeah, we can. So then we can go from here to service ID. What I tried to do here, I tried to connect the primary key to the foreign key that it's supposed to connect to. So again, mandatory one on this side, optional many on this side. All right. Now, in the ER model, it is important that you put names, owns, of course, this is a associative entity. So the name of the relationship is essentially that one, performs, and that's let's call it perform. So that's the name of the relationship because this was an associative entity. Here, we can call it service performed on vehicle, however way, because that's going to be the name of the table that you're going to do. Is that important? Not really. You can name your tables whatever you want. And the other thing I'm going to do, and this is sort of what I was telling a few people, and I also put a note in the assignment. Since I want to keep these tables together, this is again an optional part, but this will help you a lot because if there is already a customer table in your database, you might have conflict between this customer and the customer that you're creating. So ideally, put a prefix so that all your tables created from this schema will all have the same prefix and it'll be easy to deal with. So by doing this, notice that our process of exporting to a database is going to be a lot easier. So now that I have got this, I think I've got mostly correct. We'll figure out if it's correct or not. I'm going to hit the export button. Now this is a shortcut we are doing. This is going to give us an initial model. It does all kinds of weird things that I do not like, and you're going to see I'm going to change all of that. But it basically creates all of these table descriptions, including primary keys and foreign keys. And we will talk more about primary keys and foreign keys, but at least for now, this process helps us out with that. So I'm going to copy to clipboard. I'm going to open up text edit, which is my text editor in the Mac. You can use any text editor you want. I'm gonna make paste that here. Let's make the font a little bigger so you can see it. Just say. All right. So there are a few things that I have talked about, but basically when we're creating a script, one of the first things that you want to do is you want to have drops and creates at the same time. But before we go there, here's one more thing that I want to do. I hate these double quotes. I do not like them at all. And remember, one of the reasons why double quotes are needed sometimes is if you have spaces in your table name or attribute name. Again, that's another thing that is absolutely not recommended. Do not put spaces. If you need a space, put like an underscore if that is something you want to do. Do not put spaces. So what I'm going to do, first thing I always do when I take this shortcut by generating, ideally, you should be able to write these create table statements. Not complicated. Create table, name of the table, open parentheses, and then the list of attributes and their data types. Of course, at the end, you put a comma and you create the constraints like primary keys, foreign keys. Some of them you'll have to say whether they're null or not null and things like that. But those things are not that difficult, but at least this gives us a first step. Especially since I'm creating a quick video, this makes it easier for me. So for first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say edit find and replace. And I'm going to take all the double quotes and replace them with nothing. I'm going to say replace all. There. All my double quotes went away, which is how it should be. Should not have double quotes. I do not like double quotes. Do not use double quotes. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy these create table statements and put them above because as I said, ideally you want to do put drop tables for every create tables in a script. So I'm going to put them in the reverse order in which they're created. That's just a thumb rule. We'll explain more on why that's needed. It's basically to avoid any inter-table dependencies. Technician, then service performed. I think we only have 5 tables here, right? Yeah, we have 5 tables, so we will have 5 drop tables. So instead of create, we're going to change this to drop. And of course, we need semicolons at the end. Now you notice that you have primary key customer ID here. And then if you look at the vehicle, you have a customer ID in here. And your constraint would be customer ID, this guy, is a foreign key, and it references the M2 customer table's customer ID field. And this is the part that Lucidchart is not going to automatically do unless you, in your diagram, you actually point customer ID, the primary key, to the foreign key. Just by connecting to the tables is not enough. All right, so that is what will make this a lot easier. I'm going to save this as, let's say, ml2 draft.txt. Now I'm going to go into my Oracle account. SQL Workshop, SQL Scripts. I'm going to upload this guy. Choose file. Take it to my documents. There's my ml2 draft.txt. And let's run this thing. Okay, we're going to run this. And we might get errors and we will fix it. But now first you notice that all of my drop tables gave me errors. And the error is the table or view does not exist. I'm okay with it because these tables were not there. That's why we got the error. And that's perfectly fine. The first time you run it, all the drop table statements should give you errors. If one of them did not give you error, that means somebody else, some other project had the same name and you just dropped that table. So that's why these M2 or whatever prefix you want to use is important. Now, the other thing that you would see is that once I run it, once the first drops gave me errors, and there are a few more errors, we're going to look at those, but I can run it again. And this time, the drop statements will not give me errors. There are still a couple of error messages because we had errors creating those tables. So we will need to figure those out in a minute. So now we know at least the script is working okay. So now let's take a look at the errors that we are getting. Customer worked fine. Service worked fine. Looks like in vehicle we had a problem. It says invalid identifier on a dot. So let's take a look at where that is. So this is in the vehicle table. And one of the problems is, of course, it gives you some line numbers, errors at line 8, column 27. It may not always represent the line where it is. So for example, line 8 is this one. That's obviously not where the error is. The error is in here somewhere. So let's take a look at model year in, customer ID. Now, when you get an error that you can't figure out where is that happening, it's just telling you in that command, one thing you could do is you can just copy this, go to SQL Workshop and SQL commands and just run that one just by itself. Now we see that error. It says it's a dot invalid identifier. So we have a dot somewhere that should not be there. Oh, so it looks like uh, the script generation, it actually puts the name, puts a dot in the name. That is strange. I did not notice that. And Oracle does not like that. So what we will do is take out the dot and replace it with an underscore and see if that works. And yes, that was it. So that's what it did. So notice that error messages do make sense, but the line number is not. So let's run it again and see um, line 827. So it is line 8, column 27 for that specific command. So the line number makes sense only when you run it as a single command. So SQL command is actually a very nice way to test out these commands one at a time. So what we'll do is, now that we know what the error message is about, we will go back to SQL scripts. We're going to edit this guy and we will change this dot to underscore. And I'm pretty sure it made that same mistake in other places. I don't know why it puts the dot. Dot has a different meaning, but that's why, a lot of times I suggest that instead of using this export feature, spend the time and write the commands yourself. That way you are in total control on how these are being created. All right, so now that we have fixed those, let's run it and see if it works. I still have one error in the drop statement, which we don't care about because that's the drop we got. In fact, we can run it again, and this time even the drop will work. All right, so now all of our statements worked, everything worked properly. We can go over in SQL Workshop and Object Browser. And because we put an M2 prefix in front of all of them, you will see that all of our tables are at the same place. If I did not have it, customer would be up there, service will be down here, technician will be somewhere down there, vehicle will be all the way to the end. So you're going to have to look through those things. Putting M2 is actually makes it easier. And you should be able to just say M2 and only your M2 tables will show up. So the prefixes are very nice to have, but now you can see all of our tables are properly created. And one thing you can see is, let's go to service performed and we can go to model. This might take a while, but you will see that the model will show all of the relationships with the tables that it connects to. So that's essentially what I thought I would just record a video so you can follow along. You do not have to use all of them, but here it is. Here's the model. Here's M2 service performed, and it has relationship with vehicle, technician, and service. So that's it for the video. I'm going to share this with you guys in a little bit and see you all soon in another video, hopefully.